Hello, my name is Andreas Berlet and I'm presenting to you TopNav, efficiently navigating through industrial process plant topologies. This is a joint work with Dr. Julius Rückert and Dr. Heiko Koziolek from the ABB Corporate Research Center in Germany and Professor Reinhard Rath and Professor Mike Barth from the Pforzheim University of Applied Sciences in Germany. I wrote my master's thesis about this research topic, and after my studies, I joined the company CodeRights GmbH in Karlsruhe as a software engineer in the field of industrial automation. Now I want to give you some context about the topic. So in the background, you see an example of an industrial process plant. Modern process plants consist of thousands of pipes, vessels, pumps, temperature sensors to enable the production, for example, of steel, cement, or fertilizer. During the plant engineering phase, the process plant is specified in the form of piping and instrumentation diagrams. So here you see an example. Those diagrams are still relevant during the life cycle of the plant for some use cases. And in our work, we focused on the perspective of data analysts who analyze plant disturbances based on historical signal trends. We proposed the method TopNav. It stands for Topology Navigator, and the core idea is to visualize those diagrams with software tools and to navigate through them. The method supports systematic searching for flow paths and feeding the results into analytical tools. Here is a simple example of a piping and instrumentation diagram, or short P&ID, to explain you the basic concepts. Usually they contain three categories of components. First one are the non-electric components, such as vessels or pipes, where the gas or liquid is running through. Then there are sensors to measure, for example, the level in a vessel, or the temperature, the pressure, or the flow rate in a pipe. Those signals are forwarded to controllers. Their algorithms then generate control signals for the actuators to affect the production process. So for example, here's a pump, these are valves, and this is a heater. On this slide, I want to tell you more about the perspective of data analysts. We performed interviews with data scientists from ABB Research to find out how they analyze plant disturbances. And usually they start analyzing signals coming from sensors or controllers. So for example, here are 30 signals, which were recorded in a time range of 48 hours. This data analyst is quite happy because he found 4 sensors that indicate a plant disturbance. The question now is there a flow path between these 4 sensors? This context information is important to conclude causality. So are those 4 sensors and disturbances belonging to the same root cause disturbance, or are they maybe isolated? So the analyst has to look at the P&I diagrams, and after a while, he finds the first sensor here, second one here, and so on. Now he takes a pencil to mark the flow paths. But when it comes to the full amount of pages of the diagram, he's really shocked. And you can imagine now it will be very time consuming and error prone since human cognition is limited and you may oversee important flow paths. This photo was taken by my former colleague Heiko Koziolek, and they had to spread out the diagram pages on the floor because it required so much space. In the last 15 years, researchers have proposed several tools and methods to turn these diagrams into machine-readable models and added navigation features. However, our requirements engineering phase turned out that the existing navigation capabilities are not sufficient. So for example, it's not always enough to navigate from a start to a target element because sometimes the target element is unknown. Regarding the visualization, it turned out that especially when visualizing navigation results across multi-page diagrams, the existing approaches are not intuitive enough. Here is an overview about the 8 steps of the TopNav method. The first 3 steps existed already. They were introduced by Hörnicke et al. In 2015. They developed a topology editor concept, which was later extended by Koziolek et al. In 2020. Our contribution starts here, where the topology model is visualized and navigated through. Importing P&IDs requires the existence of P&IDs. Usually they are drawn in CAD tools And some of those tools have export features to store the diagrams in an open machine-readable format. Examples are DEXP, it's XML based and stands for Data Exchange in the Process Industry, or SmartPlant P&ID from Hexagon, or Microsoft Visio. Each input format requires it to implement a topology importer module. As a second step, a manual mapping process needs to be performed once. So on the left side, you see all the types which are present in the model from the CAD tool. On the right side, the user has to select from a topology object library. So he has to see which type matches best to a tank. And in this case, it's a vessel. And when the process is finished, it could look like this. We decided to have an internal model because then all other software components are harmonized and are not dependent on the different input formats. Moreover, the target model information is reduced compared to the source model. So for example, it features a lower number of attributes and classes because it's tailor-made for specific use cases. When the topology model is created, it could look like this. There are several approaches to model topology information. However, all related work has in common that the models follow graph theory principles. In our case, it's an object-oriented model, and this node could be a topology object with the class vessel, some attributes such as name, volume, coordinates, and interfaces, which are ingoing or outgoing arrow symbols. To have later an intuitive visualization, we decided to store the graphical information from the CAD tool as image files, so there will be one image for each P&ID page. Here, the visualization and navigation through the topology model begins. On the right side, you see our envisioned user interface for the TopNav method. We also implemented a prototype according to it. And now I want to explain you which software components are required to realize it. The topology visualizer component loads the image file of the diagram in the background, and in the foreground, it creates semi-transparent colored shapes based on the coordinates in the topology model to highlight certain elements. On the left, there's the search mask. So far, 8 search parameters were implemented. They were derived from interviews with data scientists. And in this example, the user has selected the element P101 as the mandatory start element. So it's this orange mark pump. And he wanted to search for elements of type vessel in forward direction. So he could find those 2 flow paths. The selected search parameters will be forwarded to the topology navigator component. It can be considered as a graph traversal algorithm. It traverses the topology model and returns paths to target elements. It forwards the result to the visualizer component. So then it updates the view on the right side to show the new navigation result. If the navigation result is of interest, it can be exported. The exporter component establishes a connection to the distributed control system to retrieve live and historical process data from the data historian. So time series data will be returned. This is a planned step, which is not implemented yet. Finally, the navigation result gets exported, for example, for analytical tools. And based on our requirements engineering phase, the desired formats are CSV, JSON, XML, and Automation ML. In the following 2-minute screencast of the prototype, you will see a more extensive topology model. It was generated by 8 P&ID pages. On the left side, the user selects a start element. Some parts of the video are blurred because of data privacy reasons. So now there is a level sensor attached to a vessel. And for example, the first level sensor could indicate a disturbance, and the user selects another level sensor, which is close, to see if it has a disturbance as well. It could give hints in which direction the root cause disturbance is. So 2 paths are returned as a result. And now the user searches for a target type. So he does not specify an element name, and 2 paths are found again. Now the user changes the search direction. The first time you see a navigation result across multiple pages. 9 pump elements were found. Here's another example. The user selects a vessel as a start element and navigates backwards. And this time he did not specify any target element or type. He just uses the search parameter maximum range, to explore the paths where the fluid is coming from. This time the user has opened a topology model which was generated by process graphics from a distributed control system. So you see the TopNav method is not limited to piping and instrumentation diagrams. To validate the method improvements in query formulation and visualization, we performed a structured user study. Prototypes from related work were not publicly available, so we decided to compare our method to the manual P&ID analysis, which is still the predominant approach used in practice. The overall question of this study was if navigation tasks within a P&ID can benefit from tool support by making the execution faster and less error-prone. 8 scientists participated, each of them 90 minutes, and we recorded the sessions to do a detailed post-analysis of the time and errors. There were 2 task categories, a single page and a multi-page diagram, 3 difficulty levels, and 2 navigation approaches. So for each participant, there were 12 subtasks. They started with a PDF editor where they opened a diagram and used a virtual pencil to mark the flow paths. Afterwards, they solved the same navigation task when using the TopNav prototype. Here you see an example of a manual navigation task. The participant successfully found 3 flow paths to those off-page references and started at this element. This box plot diagram shows the most important quantitative result of our user study. It shows the human processing time for executing navigation tasks. Please consider that the x-axis is nonlinear for layout purposes. We defined the task difficulty index as the sum of elements and branches that need to be traversed to solve a navigation task. There are more parameters which affect the difficulty, but they are not as clear to measure in a quantitative way. The gray boxes here show the required time when using the PDF editor and the virtual pencil to solve the navigation task. So with the increasing difficulty, also the required time increases. The red boxes show the required time when using the TopNav prototype. So the method supported effort remains nearly time constant. And when comparing the medians of the most difficult task, an up to 90% time saving can be calculated. Overall, the results of the user study did not reject our hypothesis about the potential of the method for error and time savings. Also, they indicate how quickly the difficulty increases with the complexity of the plant topology. So when the participants solved the more difficult tasks manually, they struggled a lot, did a lot of errors, and more information you will find in our research paper. Now the conclusion. In our work, we proposed a method to visualize and intuitively navigate through topology models. Going beyond related work, there are 3 core contributions. Sophisticated user queries. So far, we implemented 8 search parameters. A graph traversal across multi-page diagrams is possible. And we propose an intuitive visualization that aids understanding plant topologies. Now it is possible to see navigation results across multi-page diagrams. And as just said, a user study was performed, which shows the potential of the proposed method. In the future, it is planned to extend the navigation capabilities. So more search parameters will be added, for example, to search for control loops or to follow only paths that run certain media, such as water or oil. The visualization can be improved, so especially for a large set of diagrams to increase the readability. At present, the TopNav method is limited by the prerequisite that machine-readable topology information must be available. However, a major perspective lies in the upcoming DEXP standard. Since 2011, many companies, universities, and organizations participate to push the standard forward. So we expect that it will increase the availability of topology models in the process industry in the coming years. So thanks a lot for your attention.